Hi and welcome. Thank you all for being here. My name is Mel. I am a lead analytics engineer. This is Gordon. He is the head of analytics engineering at Virgin Media O2. And today we will be talking to you about rewriting the data playbook.
Now, once upon a time, many years ago.
Well, not that many years ago, probably like 2015.
Well, let's go back 10, 15 years. A dark time with no DBT. Mel, you were probably still at school building dashboards out of Lego. And during this time, data engineering came to place for companies to spend money, huge sums of money.
Everybody wanted to be data-driven, and data teams ballooned in size due to this.
Similar to when we joined Virgin Media O2 back in 2021, we came across a balloon-sized team, hundreds of data engineers doing transformation for the company.
Now, fast forward to 2025, and the data landscape looks very different.
So like us at Virgin Media, analytics engineering teams have replaced data engineering teams for data transformation. We no longer have hundreds of data engineers. We have teams of 10 or 20 analytics engineers. And CEOs no longer talk about being data-driven. They just write blank checks for anyone who mentions AI. Spearheaded by tooling like DBT Airflow, the age of big data teams was over, replaced by analytics engineering teams running lean and mean operations.
So we're here today to talk to you about how you can make your team lean. It's all about the people and the process, not the tooling. But before we go into that, should we introduce ourselves maybe?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. So we are from Virgin Media O2. We are one of the UK's largest connectivity providers, serving over 42 million mobile subscriptions and 5 million fiber optic broadband and TV cable customers.
So we connect people to what matters, whether that's staying in touch, surfing the internet, streaming content, or gaming. And every decision that we make in data impacts tens of millions of customers each day.
So Mel, when you're looking to build a lean, mean analytics machine, what's important to you?
Well, our mission is to build the best data modeling and transformation system that we can. Firstly, speed. We work as fast as possible whilst maintaining quality standards and reliable data. We build in a way that allows our models to scale, and we do this by using wide tables and structs. We strive for a collaborative approach within our team and downstream users. And finally, governance. We make sure our models are tagged correctly for PII and are GDPR compliant. So G, that's the what. Now, how do we achieve this?
Well, it's about 3 simple steps. The right people, facing the facts, and focus. Firstly, the right people. You have to be really selective about who gets on the bus for the journey. It's not just about hiring skills. It's mindset, discipline, and shared purpose. When you have the right people in the right seats, everything else, culture, process, and delivery falls into place. Facing the facts, the best teams have the courage to confront reality. And I think we saw that this week with Fivetran actually admitting when they built their first data lake, they rebuilt it and scrapped it. Another one, DBT with Fusion. How many companies these days rebuild their middleware just so that they can be ready for AI and the future? This is amazing stuff. This is what we're trying to do in VMO2. And finally, focus. We must stay laser focused on what we do best, own it completely, and always remain output obsessed. So Mel, start at the top. Who are the right people?
Well, the right people are those who put process and outcomes above tools. So when we hire at Virgin Media O2, we look for mission-driven people, people who are not tool-obsessed, but rather care about using the right tool for the job and asking the right questions. Next comes process-driven people. These are the people that follow process even when taking shortcuts seem very tempting. They enforce testing and reviews, which build trust in our data. We also look for team players, people that collaborate and are happy to own part of the process, not everything. This keeps people accountable and also makes them feel part of something bigger. Next, adaptable learners, people that embrace change. The data landscape moves fast, and one moment you might be scheduling your jobs using Airflow, the next you might be moving to dbt jobs, and we look for people who can adapt. Finally, humble leaders. They balance humility with determination, they don't take the credits, and they usually stand silently behind, putting their ego aside. They also get involved with developments and coding, so they themselves don't fall behind.
Okay, Mel, now that you've got your perfect team, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is to face the brutal facts and see things how they are. Now, a good example of this is the story of Admiral James Stockdale.
Ooh, I love a good story.
Now, I'm sure all of you know who he is, but in case you don't, he was a US naval officer and prisoner of war in Vietnam, imprisoned in a Vietnamese concentration camp for 7.5 years. He survived brutal conditions, torture, and isolation. When he finally got out, people asked him, who didn't survive? That's easy, he said. It was the optimists. The people who said, we'll be out by Christmas, we'll be out by Easter, New Year's, Thanksgiving. All these dates came and went, and their hopes were crushed when they were still there. They got lost, and they lost their will to survive. He survived by being brutally honest with himself about the reality of his situation, no matter how bad it was. And that is kind of what we've done at Virgin Media O2. We faced the ugly truth and we dealt with it.
Thank you, Mel. Look, I'd never dare compare our 4-year journey with that of the journey that Admiral Stockdale faced, but his story is truly inspiring when you're trying to make real change in a company. We've had multiple situations where teams have been restructured, our plans have collapsed around us, and we've been waiting for the cavalry and it's never arrived. During these times, we've had to keep faith in our vision and each other. And yes, we've had loads of frustrations, we've had big setbacks, but we've always reminded ourselves about our final goal and where we want to get to, because we realize change doesn't happen. It takes hard effort, it takes hard work, and it takes belief in the right people.
Okay, G. So do you have any stories when we had to face the brutal facts at Virgin Media O2?
So at Virgin Media O2, when we joined, we actually had to face brutal facts from day one. When I joined, every morning the data warehouse was locked out until 10 o'clock. No one could query the database. Outages were daily, and fixes weren't measured in hours, they were measured in days and weeks. Deployments had stalled, and the team was drowning in technical debt, yet its management refused to acknowledge this fact and continued to send more and more work. There was no transparency, no accessible repos, just a black box of code, and worst of all, a quiet culture of denial. Stakeholders had stopped complaining, not because they were happy, but simply because no one ever responded to them. We knew the current infrastructure would not survive in the modern world. We knew the skills and attitude had to evolve, and we knew we needed modern tooling. We hired an entirely new team, people who knew what best-in-class meant. We brought in DBT, Git for transparency, version control, and lineage, and we worked to empower analysts and data science to transform their own data. This is what facing the brutal facts looks like in practice, being honest about failure, refusing to accept mediocrity, and rebuilding with discipline and focus. And that's how we move from bad to great.
Okay, so we took the decision to rebuild our entire infrastructure from scratch. That's a pretty brave decision.
That's right, Mel. Although, at the time, all I knew it was the right decision. The fact it was a brave decision, I only learned years later when a lot of my colleagues told me that we were mad to take on the challenge that we were doing. But when we took on the challenge, we didn't go in blindly. One of the key principles we took with us was what we call our hedgehog principle. And I bet you all want to know what our hedgehog principle is.
Well, I'm going to tell you that. So let's discuss the hedgehog concept. The idea is inspired by the parable of the hedgehog and the fox. Now, the fox knows many things and tries many different strategies to eat the hedgehog, while the hedgehog knows one thing: roll into a spiky ball and protect himself. And this strategy works every time. In business terms, the hedgehog is about finding one clear strategy that drives success and sticking with it.
So Mel, can you please summarize our 3 hedgehog principles?
So that is the thing the company cares about, things that we are best at the world at, and finally, things that drive profit and make us money. Now, in data terms, we looked at what we're best at. Before, the team had too broad a focus. They took on ingestion, DevOps, APIs, SOCs, transformation, and even AI. It was too much for a single team to take on. Even though there were other teams who were in charge of these areas and did things better, they wanted to own everything.
So what was the net result of this?
Well, quite simply, it bottlenecked the company. Taking on too many things with a huge amount of technical debt meant that the company data came to a complete standstill. So when we came on board, we allowed other teams to take back areas where they excelled and only focused on what we knew we did best, which was data transformation, consent, SOCs as an example. So this broke the bottleneck. And a good example of this, G, do you mind going through it?
Yeah, so as we discovered with the hedgehog principle, it's all about focusing on what we're best at and avoid being distracted by anything else. Take our marketing comms platform, for example. The previous team ran the whole process end to end. They did the customer profiling and the audience segmentation, what we generally call traits. And that sounds great, but under our hedgehog principles, it's a recipe for failure.
Why is it a recipe for failure?
So there are two parts to the project. The first part is the customer profile. For example, your consent and your customer information that you're sending through. The second part is the segmentation, like events or traits. The customer profile, the data rarely changes, if ever, but it needs to be well maintained and really accurate. The second part of it is the segmentation. The code can change every day, but the maintenance and accuracy is not at the same level as the customer profiles. So if we took it all on, what would happen? Well, in reality, we would take on a fragile system with a high risk of failure due to the constant changes in code going into our core product. I would also lose one or two members of my team to meet the demands of marketing, who would suddenly realize that actually they want to change their code every day. And so therefore, we would actually ultimately become a bottleneck. So instead, we focused on what we do best. We built the first part, the customer profiles, and we empowered the marketing analytics team to build the traits in DBT. They landed the data in our federated data system, and we simply pick up their feed and push it across into the market, into the Braze platform to do our traits. The result is a system that's worked seamlessly for 2 years, no bottlenecks, marketing being able to respond quickly to what the market's demanding. And that's when we talk about focus, then that's what we mean, doing fewer things better and creating a system where every team is empowered to deliver to their strengths.
So that's just one example. But in order to create a modern data process, what else should we be thinking about?
Well, that's a great question, Mel. So we've gone even further than this, and we've actually adopted DevOps and software engineering principles into our build.
So how did we achieve a modern data process at Virgin Media O2? Firstly, we adopted a DevOps process. For environments, we test our code in our sandbox, then we deploy to UAT, and finally to prod. We also run a zero limits in our CI/CD pipeline with each merge request. This basically runs all the code, but none of the data. So if a column name is changed, as an example, it will tell us the downstream impacts before we push this live to prod. The great thing about this is that it's fast and it's free. We also monitor our tables in terms of uptime, and our immutable deploys mean our code won't change, even after it's been deployed, unless we go through the entire DevOps process again. Next, we adopted software engineering processes. We use GitLab for version control, and we build our models modularly. An example of this is our base models. We build them in such a way that we focus on not repeating code. Our tables are wide, denormalized, and data is put into structs in BigQuery. This allows others to pick up these structs and add them to their models instead of rewriting the same code, possibly with a slightly different logic. Finally, we perform code reviews and unit tests using dbt Cloud. So we've talked about all these things, but the biggest change for us was our federated data system. G, can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so let's look at the final building blocks of a modern data process. Now, if I'm honest, VMO2 were late to the party. Practices like data mesh, federated data systems had already taken off elsewhere. In fact, I'd even worked on them in other companies. We were still trying to catch up. Our analysts and our data science teams were completely dependent on the data engineering teams to ingest, transform, deliver the data before they could even start analyzing it. They had no way to transform or share the data. So we made a bold change. We invested heavily in training, empowering the teams with the skills and the confidence to transform their own data in dbt. But almost immediately, the next challenge arrives. How do we share that data effectively across domains and across the company? And here, we needed a proper publisher-subscriber model. We needed to treat the data as a product and not a byproduct, and that's where Analytics Hub comes in. It's a GCP product built for selling data externally. But we used it to share data internally, to create our own federated sharing model across domains. In fact, we worked so closely with Google to make this work for us that later this year, Google are going to launch their own product called Data Products, which is their internal sharing platform, which is basically built on what we built with their Analytics Hub platform. Once we had built our publisher-subscriber platform, we had to add in the guardrails. Data contracts for data accountability, metadata management for traceability, security and access controls for different layers of protection, and performance and optimization to keep costs and data running fast. Putting it all together, what we've achieved is a structured, trusted group of data products, and this is the real foundation of scaling data at VMO2.
So great, Chi. So we've got the people, we've got the focus, we faced the facts, we've implemented DevOps and software engineering principles. Can we now finally please talk about dbt Cloud?
Okay, Mel, if you must.
So there are tons of tools out there, but we choose the ones that work best for us. BigQuery is our main data warehouse. We use GitLab for version control and dbt Cloud for transformation.
Why do we love dbt Cloud so much in our team, Mel?
So why dbt Cloud works for us? It allows us to build modularly, so we take code from one model to another quite easily by referencing structs instead of repeating logic. It supports idempotency, which means we can run the same model again and again and get the same results even over our incremental models. dbt Cloud also provides a range of incrementalization strategies that we use to run our larger models. So we don't need to rerun the same jobs over and over again from scratch each time. It has a whole library of macros and allows us to build our own macros to prevent repeating code. It supports different languages, and at VMO2, we use SQL, Python, and GraphQL. It's also easy to switch between projects. So we have over 100 dbt projects and 300 users. So if we want to switch from our data modeling project to the SOX environment, it's easy for us to do that. dbt Cloud also allows us to schedule our own jobs at a click of a button, which takes off a lot of pressure from the data engineering teams who would need to schedule jobs for us using other tools like Airflow. It supports the zero CI/CD pipeline, so we can test our code before pushing it to prod. And ultimately, dbt Cloud allows us to bring all our code together from different sources and transform it all in one place. And that's why we love dbt Cloud, Gordon, and why it forms the final part of our process. So now what happens?
So now what happens? We let momentum take its natural place. Momentum is key, but let me explain the importance of this. When we started, we had two options. We could enforce change, or we could build momentum. The problem with enforcing change is that if it doesn't fit in with our principles of ownership. And the second part is that enforcing change in a large organization is risky because management is constantly changing. So momentum, on the other hand, can't be stopped. Let me explain why it can't be stopped. Imagine you were standing at the top of a hill and we've got a large flywheel. Now, we've got to get the flywheel to the bottom of the hill. So to start with, it takes a huge amount of effort to start moving the flywheel. But once it goes over the edge and it starts rolling, nothing can stop it. Likewise, once people are empowered, everything changes. When they take ownership, grow their skills, and see their lives improve, there's no going back to the old estate. And others will follow, and that's what creates momentum. And that was our aim, is to create momentum amongst the data science communities and analytics communities.
And how did we start pushing the flywheel?
So to start with, we started with the early adopters. These were the few teams that actually could see our vision and understood what we wanted to do. And we began our journey, but quickly, over time, the other teams saw the results. They saw the empowerment that ownership gives you, and we had people training up to be trained and get their licenses. Then after 3 years, the results were that we have over 300 DBT users in our company. We have 92 core models running on 36,000 DAGs, but even more impressive than that is there's 353 federated models built off the back of our systems by these guys who have become DBT users in the last 3 years. And our production uptime is 99.9%, which means we have virtually no failure in our system. So with many teams using DBT, we do not become the bottleneck, but that's not quite it, and Mel will explain why.
So greatness doesn't happen in a single moment. It's not about a spike in success. It's about resilience across cycles. So when is greatness actually achieved? It starts with disciplined people, thought, process, and action. You can have the best tools in the world, but without a disciplined team, you don't have a foundation. Next comes the hedgehog concept, where you stop trying to be everything to everyone and instead focus on what you are good at. For us, that's building trusted, scalable, and reliable data products. Next is the tools. That's why DBT Cloud has been so powerful for us. It's not the tool itself that makes us great. It's how our team uses it with discipline, such as making use of idempotent transformations, version control, and testing. From there, the flywheel begins to turn, and over time, that momentum becomes unstoppable. From there, there is the culture of discipline, and this is where we at Virgin Media O2 are currently at right now. So what is the culture of discipline, Chi? Because I know you love talking about it.
It is my daily chore at the moment, but having 300 users is a huge achievement. But real success comes from building a culture of discipline amongst those 300 users. That means every user must follow the same principle: standardization, idempotency, and ownership. Yes, it takes effort to keep everyone aligned, but that's a small price to pay for the speed at which the company is now moving at. Because discipline is not about control, it's about consistency. And consistency is the key. And once that consistency becomes a habit, we'll reach the stage which we call enduring results. And the process runs like clockwork: repeatable, reliable, and self-sustaining. Mel, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think that about covers it. I think that guy over there is falling asleep. So.
Cool. So just for our references, so thank you everyone. So we have referenced a few books: The Toyota Way, The Phoenix Project, Good to Grey, and The Goal. Just for stop being accused of plagiarism at this stage. But yeah, no, thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, please feel free. So the actual transfer, it took longer than you'd think. It took approximately 3 years because there was a merger in the middle of that time. So the first part we did was the Virgin Media side. That took about 9 months to get the data moved across into the cloud and then build. And then we had to wait a while until we got the O2 data post the merger to bring that data across and then build that as well. But they're both built on greenfield sites. Yeah. Well, this is the really interesting thing about it is telecom companies in the UK or in Europe are extremely rich. One thing they don't struggle from is a lack of money. It's how to spend the money. So when we started, we ran alongside both teams so that they could see the change happening in real time and what was happening on two sides. And it was actually really interesting because people could not believe a team of 12 could beat a team of 800 at every project, every time, every deliverable. But it is possible when you've got the right tooling and the right attitudes and everything. So that was really interesting. Eventually what happened is, as we built the stuff out, we depreciated on that side. And then as the momentum moved with the analytics teams especially, they stopped using the old teams' data sets and came fully on board with us. The data science team were easier to pull across because they had not had 20 years of using the old data systems. They had only had a couple of years and they were already fed up. They moved across really quickly. So yes, we ran alongside each other and gradually everyone, and we never forced anyone to move over to us. We just said, this is what we're going to offer you, and if we do our job right, you will come. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Please.
Could you talk about how you manage 100 DBT projects and how you avoid redundancy across them?
Do you want to go for that?
Because Virgin Media is it's a really, really large company, we have set different teams that do different things. So our team is more focused on the data modeling team. We have another team that looks after GCP, BigQuery. A lot of the permissions are managed by them in terms of who gets access to what, when they set up different GCP projects, different DBT projects. So we have a process that everybody has to kind of go through in order to get something put into the system.
So I think just to add to that, so within the company structure, so if you imagine that we have maybe 8 data science teams. So each one of those data science team will have its own domain and it'll have its own project. Then we'll have something like 50 analytics teams. They will each have their own domain and their own responsibilities to work within. Once they're in their domain and they take data into the domain, that data has to remain in their domain. Okay? The only way they can share that domain is through Analytics Hub, one point, and they have to go through the publisher and subscriber model. They are then responsible for the data they put up there and the SLAs that come with that data. So if they want to publish data, they can, and it goes through that. So we have 100 projects, literally because we have so many teams. There's over 20,000 employees at Virgin Media O2. So you can imagine each of those teams have their own teams. We've got network teams, fraud teams, finance teams, operations teams, sales teams. It just carries on. The list just goes on. Therefore, what has also happened, just before you asked, is that there is a business layer, but we have stepped out. Unlike most analytics teams, analytics engineering teams, we have stepped out of the business layer and we've handed the business layer over to the analytics teams because we do not have the manpower to discuss KPIs with 500 stakeholders every week. So we have moved out of there and given it to them. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, cool. Anyone for anything else? That's brilliant.
Cool.
Thank you so much
you.
for your... Cheers. Thank you.